Welcome to Flashback, the fourth in the series. So I hope you've been sticking along with us over the weeks. This week we're looking at the 20th to 21st century. I'm Tara Monroe, founder of Opal22's Arts and Edutainment, and this is...
I'm Edisa the Verbalizer. I'm a poet. It's great to be on Flashback. I can't wait to dive into today's journey.
So we're looking at Get Up, Stand Up today, and really trying to understand what was happening over the years, from coming over here after World War I, looking at how the scramble of Africa affected us in the UK, and how times changed, or has time changed over this period. So we're going to be starting off looking in Cardiff, because that was the first uprising in 1919, and moving right the way forward to 2011.
So Mark Duggan, right?
Yeah, with the recent uprisings that we had in London and all over the country. So stick with us. See how is it. What do you think about that time period?
Well, so much, water has passed under the bridge, but we need to study it and understand what happened and learn from it so we can move forward and have a better future. We just have to learn from the past, I think, and move forward. It's a very, very interesting time that we all need to know more about.
Yeah, and I think that is the main thing, that we should be using this month to really inspire ourselves and really kind of upgrade our intellect on where we were, who we are, and what we've done in this country. I
think it's so crucial because it puts the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now into context. It's coming from a place. It didn't just spring out of nowhere. It's coming from a struggle. And it's important we look at the foundation of that struggle.
Definitely. So one of the things that we mentioned, we're starting off at World War I, because initially after the scramble for Africa, which you were saying that you didn't hear anything about. So
in a sense of, I heard about it at school, but not from a black perspective. It was just like, a group of European countries got together and said, we're going to carve up Africa. And there was no African voice in that story. It was just a European perspective. And I didn't feel connected to it. So it's fascinating to now hear actually our involvement in it was so important.
Definitely. And you'll see some footage from a case study that I did for an exhibition that I did with the Race Equality Centre over here. And when I was asked to do that on World War I had no knowledge of how much contributions Africa, the Caribbean or India had to World War I. And I found it really interesting finding out all that information. Just having the knowledge that there was donations being put together in the Caribbean to support the British Army, and the amount of people that took themselves over to get involved in the war, to fight for the motherland. But one of the things that was quite interesting is even at that point there was a colour bar of people going into the army.
What was the colour bar?
The lighter you were, depended on whether you would even get into the army. And if you were light-skinned, you could move up the ranks, but the darker skins would just be in the trenches.
So let me get this right. So you're willing to fight for the mother country, and you're being graded on the colour of your skin as to what role you'll play in that fight?
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible.
And there was also a boat that left Jamaica at one point, and one of the first boats that was taking some of the Caribbean soldiers to the war. And while doing that, they only had their tropical uniforms. So they were, uniforms that they would had in Jamaica. They took the boat all the way to Nova Scotia, which is Canada, in the cold times, the coldest times. And they never gave them new uniforms, even though the white soldiers and the British soldiers, they had the correct uniforms to be in that land. So a lot of those soldiers lost limbs, they died, they perished, and then they were sent straight back to Jamaica without any kind of compensation. Well, so they didn't even get to the war.
Wow.
And a really interesting story. If you want to have a look into that more, the boat was called the Vendetta.
Right.
So go and check these out. These are facts that we should be known about. I can't give you all the information. I wouldn't. It'd be too long a show. We'd be going back to our 12-hour shows, and our technical guys keep on telling me off. So we need to wrap it up. So where are we going next, Edisa?
Right, we're going to watch a really interesting film, some spoken word, which is very close to my heart. And this film is by Nabiba, Iqbal, Vivek and Vadoda. And it's If I Survive, I Will Tell You Everything. So, just listen to this amazing spoken word and music.
The battle begins and our men fall like maggots. The bullets and cannonballs come down like snow. And thousands have sunk in the mud and the havoc. No one can count them, for no one can know. From dawn until dark, and from dark until dawn. As leaves fall from a tree, so our men fall to dust. Handsome faces are dimmed down by the grime of this war. Our dreams take us home, but stay here we must. In this regular hell where death is too sure. If I survive, I will tell you everything. The whole ground is covered with blood. There are heaps of men's heads and some soldiers without legs. Others have been cut in two, some without hands and others without eyes. The scene is indescribable. If I survive, I will tell you everything. I was going to die. I was going to die. I was thinking about God and His prophet. And when you wish to pray, you have to stand up. To stand up and bend down on your knees and put your forehead on the ground. But I could not do that because I was wounded so badly. So I took some earth in my hand and I put it to my forehead and I prayed to God to bless me in that way. Men weep like children crying out for their mothers. The wounded say very strange things before dying. Bleary, weak sons, fathers, husbands and brothers. We are all soap bubbles, bent double, sighing. I think this war will end soon, because the whole world is being destroyed. No men are being spared. The whole world is being finished. God knows if the land of France is stained with sin, or if this is the day of judgment we now face. Bodies of the dead fill our trenches to the brim. We sleep on top of corpses in this hellish place. If I survive, I will tell you everything. If I survive, I will tell you everything. The cold. The cold is so great that it cannot be described. I have neither rest by night nor ease by day. 6 months have passed since I saw the sun, because there is constant rain and clouds. Snow, a kind of ice that falls from the sky, looking like cotton. It stays on the ground, but when the sun comes out, it becomes water and begins to run. Just imagine how we shall feel the sun when we get back home. I can't walk anymore. My feet are frozen. Always tired, always hungry, always thirsty. If I survive, I will tell you everything. If I survive, I will tell you everything. If I survive, I will tell you everything. If I survive, I will tell you everything.
Wow.
I love that. I love the cinematography and the use of the music and the language coming together like that. It was really profound. Yeah.
It kind of gets to you, doesn't it? Just how powerful that is.
Yeah.
Getting those words across and having an understanding of what happened
Yes.
and how the feelings of those soldiers
Yes.
would have been,
Well,
what it was like.
It helps it to live on. That history can't die. It has to live on. We have to pass it on. Yeah.
Definitely.
Let's have a look at a case study from World War One of the ones you worked on.
Sure.
So this case study is of a story of a man called William Robinson Clark. Let's have a look.
My name is William Robinson Clark. Robbie to my friends. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica on the 4th of October 1895, and it was a good year. I lived a good life in Jamaica, played cricket, football, rugby, and I could have run little at college. When war broke out, I was 19, still a young man, full of life. I wanted to support the motherland. I got myself together and made my way to Britain, and on the 26th of July 1915, I joined the Royal Flying Corps, RFC. I started as an air mechanic, and on the 20th of October 1915, I was dispatched over France as a driver. But all I wanted to do was fly. Every time I saw those planes flying over, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. In December 1916, I got accepted for pilot training in England. And on the 26th of April, the 26th of April 1917, me, Robbie Clark from Kingston, Jamaica, get my wings. I got the Royal Aero Club certificate and was promoted to sergeant. I joined the 4th Squadron RFC at Adélie in Belgium and fly the RE-8 biplane, a two-seater bomber plane developed for the British Army. So I'm out on observation on 28th of July 1917 when we were attacked. I was doing some photographs a few miles over the other side when about 5 Hun, so we used to call them, scouts, swooped down upon me. And before I could get away, I got a bullet through the spine. I managed to pilot the machine nearly back to the aerodrome, but I had to put her down as I was too weak to fly. My observer escaped without any injury. I made a full recovery from my wounds, though I went back to my motherland, Jamaica, after the war and worked in the building trade, but couldn't get the army life out of my blood. I became a life president of the Jamaica branch of the Royal Forces Association. I'm proud of my contribution.
Tara, what a fascinating case study. Just to say that was also narrated by a man called
Robert Lee.
Robert Lee. How long did it take to put it together, something like that?
Well, it was kind of, I mean, the exhibition in itself took about 6 months for the research. We did a lot of research, went down to London and found out a lot of information. But doing the case studies was something just quite interesting off the tail of it, that we just wanted something that was quite visual and just to highlight the soldiers themselves. Yeah. So it was okay telling the story and looking at how things happened and the money that went out and, you know, soldiers, how many soldiers that were taking part, but to actually take individual people out was really interesting. And it was really great to find people that was from the regions of where we were talking about as well. So it was fun. It was fun at the time, but that was something that we did, it was about 6-7 years ago now that we put that together. So yeah, it was good.
For me, watching that for the first time, I was really like, you know, wow. You often hear about black pilots, but when you see the man standing there next to his plane, it's like, it's real, it's tangible, I can see it. This actually happened, it's real history. Yes. I think it's really priceless,
There are more. So if you look on the YouTube channel, you can find more of these tales, because I think there's about 7 or 8 of the case studies altogether, but I wasn't going to bore you with them all of them. So go and have a look for yourselves. So we're going to move over, where are we going now?
Let's go to Cardiff,
Cardiff, because 1919 was the first uprisings, race riots that we call them, but I'm really centering on uprisings because I don't like the word riots. I think these are times when we were standing up for ourselves, when we were really taking a lot from the environment that we were living in and not accepting it anymore. And Cardiff was somewhere that had a large Caribbean community at that point, or black community at that point, and they had certain parts which was Tiger Bay that they called Nigger Town.
Wow, literally called it Nigger.
They literally called it Nigger Town. And there was a quote that I found that it said, "The fact is that after fighting in the war, the people of Tiger Bay had to fight again for their lives, families, and homes. They had to fight against racism. So
that's crazy. I mean, as I say, they've prepared to give their life for the mother country, and then where you're living, you're fighting on your front door as well.
Definitely.
And being called the N-word on your front door. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. So, we'll show this video, we'll tell you a bit more about it after.
Thursday, 12th of June, 9 p.m, outside 264 Butte Street. 4 policemen have just carried Mohammed Abdullah, a fireman aged 21, out of Muhammad Ali's cafe and boarding house, each taking an arm or leg. He has severe and likely fatal injuries to the head. Number 264 is on fire.
The trigger was an incident that began with an argument and fracas on Crichton Street. The 2 black men involved escaped, but they were tracked by 100 pursuers. By 8 o'clock, a large mob was swarming in front of number 264. Some Somali seamen were spotted inside, and someone hurled the first missile.
The reply was gunshots through the glass panels on the door to frighten away the crowd. Sidney Blashill, aged 36, a marine engineer, then shouted, "Come on boys, let's get the niggers out." The police rallied, but as officers entered the premises with the intention of getting the seamen away to safety at Butte Street Police Station, rioters rushed in from the front and the back. "Follow me," yelled 28-year-old coal trimmer Ernest Perkins. "Let's kill the blacks." Once inside, they caused havoc, destroying furniture, arming themselves with chair legs and attacking the lodgers.
In the front room, PC James Birch says he saw a gang of white men around Mohammed Abdullah, who was already lying unconscious on the floor with bloodstains on his head. PC Frank Lamborn later says that he saw a man whom he could not identify strike Abdullah on the head with the leg of a table, which had been chopped off whilst the man was laying on the ground. As the officers climbed the stairs, Muhammad Ali fired several times. Fortunately, and maybe on purpose, his aim wasn't good. His first bullet passed through PC Ernest May's helmet. A second went through PC Brotherton's cape. In a desperate struggle, Ali dropped the gun. He was overpowered and carried into the street. At some point, Brotherton hit him in the right eye with his left fist. Ali's right eye and cheekbone are so swollen that he probably can't see. Also taken into custody are Saeed bin Saeed, 21, and Mohammed Sharif, 24, who were charged with shooting at persons unknown.
But who hit Mohammed Abdullah? Has there just been a police baton charge? They certainly did draw their truncheons. PC William Goulding said he used his to drive back several white men who were around Abdullah, including Perkins and Blashill. He admits he was excited, but denies hitting Abdullah.
That's really heavy.
It is.
And when you bear in mind, a lot of that hatred towards the black men and women was because some of the black men were dating and marrying white women, and the locals just weren't having it. No. You know, you're coming to steal our women, that old story, you're coming to steal our women. And so they dished out this kind of hatred towards black people for no other reason than that.
And it's so shocking. You know, if you've been looking at what we've been doing over the past few weeks, you will see, you'll know, we've been mixing for years. You know, we've had 2 black kings, black queens in this country.
Yeah.
The royal family are descendants of mixed race cultures. Yeah. To think that at that point people were willing to kill each other because they saw a black man with a white woman. It's kind of beggars belief. Yes. So, I mean, one of the most horrendous things that I think we were talking about was how the children were being treated. Absolutely. I believe that, you know, babies in prams would be, you know, they kick the pram. It's just, to try to show violence to a child is going to a real low level. Definitely. But yeah, to treat children like that was just, you know. Well, I was told by a friend's parent that they actually went into her pram and looked if the child had a tail. Whoa. Wow. So, yeah. True story. Yeah, on a bus. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there was some real... My mother told me about things where they said, like, oh, does it come off? Like the colour, like, can I touch the baby? Does it come off?
But the tale, no, I just thought that was on cartoons. But
No.
yeah.
Unfortunately not. So, we're going to go over to Liverpool.
Liverpool.
And Liverpool had one of the most destructive times over there. And one of the men that we should know his name, is Charles Walton.
Charles Walton, yeah.
Do you know anything about him?
I do. I know a little bit about the story that, he was chased. He was, chased by a gang and he ran for his life. Literally had to run for his life. And we're not sure whether he was pushed or he fell into the water by the docks and he lost his life. And so this is part of a whole uprising that took place at that period in time. But that story does ring out. Yeah. And
that's going to come up in the documentary we've got in a minute. And
yeah.
What's that?
So let's go to the documentary. The documentary is called Great War to Race Riots by Writing on the Wall. Let's go now.
Today, this area of Liverpool forms a vibrant and diverse community whose many cultures live peacefully side by side. Here in the Baltic Triangle, there is a thriving creative industry. But in 1919, things were very different, and these streets witnessed unprecedented racial violence, bloodshed and murder. This short film looks at some of the people and places featured in the Great War to Race Riots archive, which can be explored online and in a book available from Writing on the Wall. In 1919, as today, the city's diverse population reflected its long heritage as a thriving port. The area around Chinatown and the Baltic Triangle was known as Sailor Town and was populated by Black, Chinese, Scandinavian, Russian, Ukrainian and Italian seafarers. During World War I, industries in Liverpool that had traditionally shunned black workers welcomed men from West Africa and the Caribbean to fill the wartime labour shortage. Many worked as merchant seamen and in factories. At the end of the war, black men found themselves out of work when a colour bar in employment was reintroduced. They were blamed for the post-war economic slump and, backed by the local press, the Mayor of Liverpool, John Ritchie, sought to repatriate the city's black workers. Throughout the summer of 1919, racial violence erupted in seaports throughout the UK. On the 4th of June, John Johnson, a West Indian man who lived here at 48 Nelson Street, was brutally stabbed by two Scandinavian men for refusing to give them a cigarette. The following evening, Johnson's friends retaliated by attacking a group of Scandinavians at a pub on Bailey Street. This sparked a wave of racial violence against black people by white mobs in their thousands. On the 5th of June, police raided 18 Upper Pitt Street. A young Bermudan sailor, Charles Walton, was at home on leave during the raid. Charles fled the house and was chased by the police and an angry mob. Charles was pursued here to Queen's Dock, where he was either pushed or fell into the water. Under a hail of missiles, Charles was hit unconscious on the head with a rock and drowned. Violence intensified over the next few nights, with thousands of people attacking black homes and boarding houses. Hundreds of black men and their families were housed in police stations for their own safety. Following the riots, the Chief Constable of Liverpool and the Home Office made plans for the repatriation of black colonial workers. The killing of Charles and the race riots of 1919 stand as a landmark event and watershed for Britain's black community.
What I take from that, Tara, is that that generation was so strong. I mean, just watching it, I'm scared, and I wasn't there at that time. So I'm empowered by it. I'm empowered by the strength of that generation, and I feel an obligation to do my part now. You know, they did their part. Yeah, that's what I get from that.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I cannot imagine not being able to walk down the street without, or knowing that somebody was coming through my house. And I mean, I know there were certain times growing up where we had people throwing stones at the window and snowballs at the windows and putting stuff in through the door and stuff like that. But we're still relatively safe when we walk down the street. So not knowing, you know, who you could talk to or whatsoever, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So from there, we're going to jump really to 1944 and go straight to the Windrush, because that's when the main migration was coming over. Before that, they were predominantly soldiers from World War One, but One and Two by that time.
Yes.
But then when the Windrush community comes, there was a massive influx. Now I know if you've been sticking with us through these shows, you'll know that we've already done a Windrush show. So I don't want to give you too much here, but we've got just a small video just to give you a little bit of an overview, so you know where we're coming from.
That means a lot to me, the Windrush period, because I remember my mother saying to me that she believed that my father and her, as strangers, travelled on the same vessel from the Caribbean. Well, my mother came from Montserrat, my father came from St. Vincent, and they met a year later in their church. So Windrush period is really special to me.
Definitely, and we were saying that there is a way to find out if that is actually true.
Right.
If you go to the National Archives, and you can do it all online, you can actually find out when your parents came in and what boats they came in on. So you can find it out. Go have a look. I found out when my granddad came over. I think my granddad came over in, oh God, can I remember? I think it was 1947 he came over. So yeah, it can be found.
Yeah. And do remember to like the page and share. Let's get a lot of people watching this.
That's
right. Let's spread it.
Like the Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube, and interact. Okay, give us your comments if you want to tell us about something, if you think we've missed something out, if you want to just join in.
Yeah, I want to hear from you. Yeah.
London is the place for me. London, this lovely city. You can go to France or America, India, Asia or Australia, but you must come back to London City. Well, believe me, I am speaking broad-mindedly. I am glad to know my mother country. I've been traveling to countries years ago, but this is the place I wanted to know. London, that's the place for me. To live in London, you are really comfortable, because the English people are very much sociable. They take you here and they take you there, and they make you feel like a millionaire. So London, that's the place for me. At nights, when you have nothing to do, you can take a walk down Shaftesbury Avenue. There you would laugh and talk and enjoy the breeze and admire the beautiful scenery of London. That's the place for me. Yes, I cannot complain of the time I have spent. I mean, my life in London is really magnificent. I have every comfort and every sport, and my residence is at Hampton Court. So London, that's the place for me.
That song by Lord Kitsch, London is a Place for Me.
Love it. Love it.
Man.
Another great Trini as well.
Trini roots, yeah. And calypso music, it's amazing because yes, it's a dance music, but the politics was there, you know. The politics was there.
I mean, when you think about some of the lyrics of some of those tunes back then, they make the hairs go up on the back of your neck.
They got away with a lot of things, innuendo in there. Yeah, metaphors about. Oh, well, we'll leave that. We'll leave that there. Okay, so next up, we've got this wonderful video on a dance, but a dance that's inspired or responding to words, and it's called Rivers of Blood. And when I think of that title, Rivers of Blood, I think of Enoch Powell and that horrific speech he made all back then. But this wonderful dancer takes that language and other words and interprets it in his own voice, and it's by Sean Graham. So watch this, enjoy.
As I look ahead, I am filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. I am filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood.
Introducing Restream Studio, giving streamers the ability to multi-mad.
Literally mad as a nation to be permitted the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents who are for the most part the material of the future growth of the immigrant descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
Immediate evils of the coloured invasion, which are well known to everybody living in this area. But in our opinion, the most important is the long-term one of mass interbreeding. That must lead, ultimately, to a mulatto Britain.
Something new and ugly raises its head in Britain. In Notting Hill Gate, only a mile or two from London's West End, racial violence and the quietest street may flare up at any moment. Opinions differ about Britain's racial problems. Opinions differ about Britain's racial problems.
And I was determined that Britain will never be kept white because we are here now.
A unity of heritage that will still be there when the feuds and furies of today have long been forgotten.
Well, the violence has raised questions about how best to deal with rioting and disorder on our streets. I'm now joined by Darcus Howe, who is a writer and broadcaster, and we can speak to him now, and Marcus Dow is in Croydon. Marcus Dow, are you shocked by what you've seen there last night?
No, not at all. But what I was certain about, if you looked at young blacks and young whites with a discerning eye and a careful hearing, they have been telling us, and we would not listen, that what is happening in this country to them.
Mr. Howe, if I can just stop you, Mr. Howe, for a moment. You say you're not shocked. Does this mean that you condone what happened in your community last night?
I condone, of course not. What I'm going to condone it for? What I am not what I'm concerned about more than anything else, there is a young man called Mark Duggan. He has parents, he has brothers, he has sisters, and few yards away from where he lives, a police officer blew his head off.
Well, Mr. Howe, we have to...
Let me finish.
Mr. Howe, we have to wait for the official inquiry before we can say things like that. We don't know what happened to Mr. Duggan. We are going to wait for the police report on it. If I can take you on a little bit, you were talking about your grandson, you were talking about young people.
There's a reaction, as I said this morning, by a band of thugs and hooligans who just do not want to live to a civilized system.
They have been stopping and searching young blacks for no reason at all. I have a grandson, he's an angel. And he began to... I asked him the other day, I said, how many times have the police searched you? He said, Papa, I can't count. There's so many times.
Mr. Howe, that may well have happened, and if you say it did, I am not to gainsay you, but that is not an excuse to go out rioting and cause the sort of damage that we have been seeing over the last few days.
Where were you in 1981 in Brixton?
Just all moved in from all directions, didn't we? Like with the big truncheons and the shields, yeah. Just moved in, like they're asking for it, aren't they? The law are against us, the skinheads are against us. We can't win, can we?
Mr. I don't call it rioting, I call it an insurrection of the masses of the people.
There will be civil war in the street. There will be civil war in the street. But nobody would ever listen until the explosion.
We had nothing to lose, to be truthful. The majority of us were unemployed. We had no way out. We identified the police as the enemy. They was there, they was attacking us, they was chanting walk, and nigga, on the shields. They was identified as the enemy in that particular situation. It was really, to speak about it now cannot convey the fear and the anger that people felt at that time. Particular situation.
Do you think this has been a profound cultural shift this week, David Starkey?
What this week has shown is that profound changes have happened.
We saw after 1981 very clearly that there was no way in which black people were going to be invisible, in which we were going to disappear. Come what may, we were here to stay. And the state, both local and national, had to accommodate that fact. And in its way it did. And we haven't, as a community, since that time, witnessed the sort of denial of our existence that occurred prior to that.
What's happened is that a substantial section of the chavs that you wrote about have become black. The whites have become black. A particular sort of violent, destructive, nihilistic gangster culture has become the fashion.
Absolutely not. People, David, like myself, who may be talking a particular way, that's why we've got...
You don't talk like
them. It's a them. This is the problem. It's a them and us culture. We can't keep thinking of this as a them and us argument. We keep talking about different communities. You keep talking, David, about black culture. Black communities are not homogenous groups.
Of course not.
So there are black cultures, lots of different black cultures. We need to be talking about our children. We need to be using words like we, and stop putting this blame on different people. The blame culture has got to stop. We've got to face head on what the
to
issues
understand,
are.
when you're saying that white culture has adopted black culture, are you saying that has been at the heart of the rioting? Is it black culture that has caused rioting?
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. Well, I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such a conversation? My answer is that I do not have the right not to do. My answer is that I do not have the right not to do so.
How good was that?
It was amazing. The way he interpreted the words, and I was just like there with him on the journey, you know, he just really brought those words alive and just, this is my voice, you know, you may say this, but I say that, you know, he's coming back at us through dance. Beautiful, beautiful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So,
we've got a slight technical issue, so we're going to try to just change the filming onto this camera style. So just stay with us, yeah? We're going to be bringing it to you like that. I hope you can see us. I hope we're looking good still, all right? Right, you with us? Great.
No, something went wrong.
Streaming down.
So we might have to just cut for a minute and come straight back to you.
Okay, it's going to go for a slight commercial break.
See you on the other side.
Bye. Oh dear.
Hi, so we're back.
We're back.
Hope you stuck with us and thanks for keeping up with us. So next we're going to go over to Nottingham.
Right. There were uprisings in Nottingham as well.
There was. In the 1950s, the first one happened in Nottingham. Anybody that knows Nottingham, it happened in St Anne's at the Chase. And again, same old story.
Yeah. Mixed relationships causing, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And there was apparently about 1,500 people on the streets on the first night. And it was a real, you know, it was really bad. But the next night, apparently, which is the funny thing, a lot of the black people stayed home. And the white people, because they were out there, the white guys, they ended up turning on each other.
Well, look at that. just any reason, it just shows they're just looking for an excuse for violence, really.
Well, it's pretty much what we saw on the streets in London this year.
Yeah.
Because when we didn't turn up, the EDL just fought with themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, there's not much change going on here, is there?
Not really. There's connections in history. We've got to learn from this, yeah.
Definitely. So before we go any further, we're going to talk to a wonderful woman, which is Camille London Milo. And she is one of the founder members of the Black Teachers Association. She has many more accomplishments, but I hope you enjoy this video.
Yeah, let's switch to it now.
Right, so I'm sat here today with Camille London Mayo, and she is one of the co-founders of the Phoenix Supplementary School and also the co-founder of the Black Educators Alliance. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Right.
So tonight's show, we're talking about the uprisings that we've had in this country and how that's affected our schooling of our young people over the years throughout the century. And we're looking at the 20th to 21st century. So can you tell us a little bit about how the effects from your opinion?
Of the uprisings. Okay, so when I first came into teaching, I was based in Brixton in South London in the 80s when the uprisings happened in Brixton. And one of the key things that happened around that time was the amount of young people who were being stopped and searched, the disaffection, the unemployment, the lack of opportunity for young Black people. And it was just kind of like a culmination of all of those things together. And one of the things that I felt really, really strongly about, and I think it was part of the reason, one of the reasons why I went into education in the first place, was because I wanted to be able to, make a difference, but also challenge the status quo that suggested that as Black people, we had no part to play in the education of our children. So, so in terms of my understanding of what happened with young people at that time, it was because of that combination of things that were happening.
Did you feel that when you were at school? Did you feel that there was elements of support?
Absolutely. I remember, I always say this, I remember when I was, how old was I? I must have been about 14, and I was saying to the head teacher at a secondary school in Leicester, actually, I said, I want to go to university. And she said, because I was at a girls' school, she said, no, the girls at this school get pregnant and they go and work in a shop, and sometimes you don't, you shouldn't think about, you shouldn't aspire too much. She didn't use those words, but basically she was saying I was thinking above my station. And I went home and I cried bitterly. And I remember my mum turning around and saying to me, pull yourself together. Whatever that head has to say does not define you. And whatever you want to do, you just do what you want to do. Don't let that limit you. And that was the first time, but there were kind of like many other times after that where teachers, head teachers, kept on saying, well, no. So even when I finished my GCSEs and I got to sixth form, I remember I was doing A-level English and I was the only Black girl in this class of students learning English language. And I remember the teachers at the time who were saying to me, yeah, you may want to go to university and do it, but it's really hard for you to be able to get in. And I picked a university that they thought was one of the best ones to do English. You'll never get in because you'll never get the grades. And, so it was always having to think for yourself, well, look, whatever they say, just block it out, because my family, my mother particularly, consistently kept on saying, do not listen, focus on what you want. Do not listen, focus on what you want. It wasn't about the inspiration from teachers, not at all.
So from that, I'm gaining it's very important for us to have strong family that are really pushing us and pushing our children and young people. Would you say that's still the case now?
Absolutely. And I think that what you see, I mean, I've been in education a long time, and what I've seen is that those children who have strong family networks behind them, there's no limit to what they can't do. And that's in spite of the obstacles that are put in their way in terms of the education system, in terms of the institutionalized racism that exists within it. If they have a strong family network, there's no limit. And that's what I've found over and over again.
And I suppose that's in certain effects, that's society as a whole, that we have to keep on telling ourselves that we can do it and we are good enough. You mentioned earlier on outside of the interview that you did your thesis on
one of them. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. this was in the 80s, before it became popular. In the 80s, I did my first degree, and I decided I wanted to write about Black people being involved in uprisings. Because I'd been in Brixton at the time of the uprisings, I wanted to research further into what was going on. I couldn't get the funding for it, so I decided to do it part-time, and I had a full-time job, and obviously struggled and didn't finish. But I spent a good 3 years on it, and essentially went to Cardiff, went to all the places that there were uprisings, and went into their archives to go through the Public Records Office, all those places, to find out what the government was saying about Black people during the First World War, when the first riots happened in 1918-ish, with the Coloured Seamen's Union, and what the Public Records Office was saying, what the government was saying, and then also what the news reports were saying about Black people being in Britain, in the known centres. Nottingham was a centre as well. As I said, Cardiff. I was travelling all around the country actually, and at that time it was quite fun. Well, it wasn't funny because I was getting access to records that hadn't been looked at they'd only just been released. So there was a guy called Peter Fryer who wrote a huge tome on staying power, and he was looking at the history of Black people from, like, I don't know, Tudor times or whatever. And so a lot of the research he was doing, I was kind of like either on the back or at the front of him, trying to get stuff together. And it was eye-opening. But again, for me at that time, it was like, I'm doing all this research, I'm collating all this stuff, but nobody is supporting me to do this. I couldn't get anybody to fund me to do it, and it was just hard. So I didn't finish, but I still have stacks of research in one of my filing cabinets. Like you were saying, at some point I will publish. I haven't seen anything come out yet. I will publish, but it's a different time. It's a different time.
You should definitely. So with the information that you found, one of the things that I was doing before George Floyd and the incidents that's happened after that, I had sat with a friend of mine and we were looking at some newspaper clippings from some of the Black Power movements that were happening in England in the 70s. And we found that the narratives had not changed. They were you could just convert the names and the places and you would be talking about the same time. Would you say that was the same about the uprisings that you were looking at from 1919, I think?
Yeah, 1918, 1919. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of something that I find quite dispiriting. And especially when you look at the media today and the way that they portray Black people in certain circumstances. I mean, if somebody ever decided, well, I think they have actually, there's been a few pieces on the history of Black people in the media and how they're reported. And I know there's a bit of research on that, and Stuart Hall did a lot of things on that. So I think that in terms of, our representation, it's just like in cycles, and the negativity and this otherness of us being so separate and apart and not recognizing the contributions of Black people from way back. But it's part of this power struggle, isn't it? It's part of this, the power that says, if we're white, we have to be ahead, and if we're Black, we have to stay back. But, that's only in their heads, it's not in ours, so.
Thank you so much for that, Camille. I'm really pleased that you gave us this time for us today, and I look forward to hearing you in the discussion later on today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Camille.
Yeah.
That was amazing. You know, it was that just piece of insight into what you had been studying all that time ago and how things are within the educational side now.
It became very clear her commitment to research. You know, she's just resilient, going back to the research, and the importance of that to get the story down. Yeah,
definitely. And interesting that what the teachers were telling people, and still are in some cases.
You're shooting above your aspirations. You're aiming too high. You know, just playing it down. Yeah, but I like the fact that she refers to her mother as a driving force. Says, don't listen to them. You know, you're more than capable of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely, we need to really be inspiring our young people and making sure they are aware of everything that they can achieve.
Yeah. So I believe it's time for our discussion.
That's right. That's right. So we have some great people on the panel tonight.
Yeah, we have Brian Simmons, we have Rob Charles, we have Joe Allen, Tanner Brown, Rhoda Dakar, and Camille. Camille's also in there.
Actually, Tanner Brown's not in there today.
Oh, okay.
So Rob Charles is a musician from Leicester. He's travelled all over the place and he plays the saxophone. So. And then we've got Joe Allen, who is Leicester's first black MP and MBE. Rhoda Dakar, if you know your music from the 80s, 70s, 80s and 90s.
You're talking my time, you know, two-tone, you know, the whole Rude Boy area, that was me. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And again, Camille's going to join us as well in this discussion. So enjoy, as usual. The things that we're going to be talking about are what makes it an uprising or a riot, and what's the other question?
The other issue is about the idea that what can we do to show our younger generation the importance of knowing about the Black British civil rights movement, so they don't have to always look to America for an example of civil rights movement, what it actually is. And I think back to my schooling, and the first thing we learned about civil rights was Rosa Parks. We didn't look at civil rights in this country where we were living, which is absolutely crazy. We should look in our own backyard first.
Yes, because we had a lot happening over here. We're going to tell you more about that as we move on with the show. But enjoy the discussion.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, good evening to all our viewers today. Introduction in terms of what today's discussion debate about. Firstly, I'm going to introduce our four panelists in terms of our knowledgeable, worldly panel in terms of. But I'll let you introduce yourself. So if I start with Robert, would you like to introduce yourself and a bit of background about yourself, please?
Yeah, well, I'm a seasoned musician. Many years standing. I'm a concerned political, musical activist, music activist, in terms of making sure that when I go anywhere, when we go places.
Are you moaning? Been a moaning Millie today? Have you got a fork? Have you got a fork? Is this yours?
Yeah.
We go to our panelists, our first female, with the many books in the background. You're lucky to keep yourself, please, tell me what.
Okay, I'm Camille London-Meyer. I am a teacher first. I am one of the co-founders of Phoenix Agenda Supplementary School, and I have been in education for 30 years plus. That's it.
Okay, we go to the second female of the panel. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rhoda Dakar. I'm a musician, singer, songwriter. I also teach music. I'm local activist, always act local, think global. I'm the chair of an organisation, a patron, an ambassador, and a governor of an NHS trust. Yeah, I've done a lot of politics over the years, politicking over the years, politics, per se.
All about politics.
Sorry?
All about politics.
Yeah, politicking, not politicking. I can trick anybody.
city. Today they call me Alderman Joseph Allen.
Heard about
In terms of myself, I would describe myself as a frustrated community activist. Insofar that we talk up the talk, but we don't walk the walk. Are we together?
Thank you for that, Joe. Okay. I'm going to start in terms of individually, in terms of the first question. Yeah. What is different between an uprising and a riot? For those people who might hear about both them terminologies and kind of not understand in terms of the difference between an uprising and a riot. Or what's your terminology of uprising and a riot? I'll start with you, Rhoda, if you'd like to start, please.
Yeah, the difference between an uprising and a riot is about which side's writing about it. That's the only actual difference. So if you are the people who are trying to make a change in numbers on a street, then you are an uprising. If you are the other side, the forces of government or whoever who is trying to stop this uprising, then it is a riot. It's that simple.
All right, thanks for that. Robert, you like to add to that at all?
Well, yeah, I kind of echo what Rhoda says, but how I see it from a street kind of community's perspective is that a uprising is a calculated response to an injustice, and a riot is a spontaneous response to that injustice. That's how I see it, really.
Okay, all right. Camille, like to add to that at all?
Well, I think both definitions are apt. I think for me, I was living in Brixton when the uprisings happened in the 80s, and we didn't call it a riot. We called it an uprising, and it was challenging the injustices that were happening on the streets at that time. So so whenever I see Black people taking to the streets, I see it as an uprising every single time. So that's it.
Okay, thank you for that. Joe, would you like to add to that at all?
Yes, I'd like to add plenty. I don't buy into the concept of uprising and riots. I call it community action and community reaction. And if you would allow me to add a little bit about it, I think uprising, a media-led concept, targeting us who get up, stand up, and challenge for change. When you check it out, the media don't use those words. When the National Front or the EDL and them, they use a word like marches and demonstration when it comes to them. But when it comes to us, they use these terminologies about us going out there to create riots, disturbance, vandalism, and they demonize us. So I don't buy into the concept of uprising and riot. I call it community action, but obviously sometimes some of the boys take a little bit of reaction. You get me?
All right, thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to open it up to anybody really. In Joe's comments, Joe said it's not a riot and it's not an uprising. How do you feel about them kind of statements in terms of Joe's terminologies?
Well, I prefer the term uprising. I really do. You know, simply because when I see when we're going out to march, as Joe saying, calling it kind of and that kind of protest, it's like we have to stop thinking that we're dealing with reasonable people. You know what I mean? You know, the people that are our, I don't say our enemies, our that causes this antagonism are irrational people. You know, they are not reasonable. You know what I'm saying? You know, so uprising to me, you know, is how you deal and how we've always succeeded when we have succeeded. You know, it's been an uprising. You know what I'm saying? It's not been a response to rationality. It's a response to irrationality. You know what I'm saying? You know, that's what we got to do. That's how we got to think now. We're not dealing with reasonable, rational people now. You know, it's 2020. You know, these people are no longer ignorant. Whatever happens to us now, it's purposeful. You know, however they treat us now, there's a purpose to it, and a conscious purpose to it. You know, that's where I stand on that. So I kind of understand what Joe's saying, and I cannot disagree with it. But let's start using terms as uprisings. You know what I mean? And dissent. As we've got to take it on as how we as a positive description. You know what I mean?
I see you nodding a lot there, Camille.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because the fact of the matter is, as Robert said, we are in 2020, and so whatever is happening, whatever has been happening in terms of the institutional racism, etc., that's been going on in society, it is an informed, it is a purposeful, it is deliberate, and what we have to be dealing with right now is how we challenge that without ending up in jail or ending up in a mental institution. That's what we have to be challenging right now. Just being able to stay sane and stay on the street. And I think, yeah, so that's why I was nodding, because I do agree with what he was saying.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it does, I suppose, matter what you call it, but what actually matters is the end result. Yeah, the end result is the important thing, and the organisation thereof is the important thing. So you can, I mean, clearly if people are going out and demonstrating, that can't be called a riot. A riot is what is described usually when there's fighting. So, or wanton destruction, and that's what people see as rioting. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, it depends. If people are pushed to the point where that's all that's left to them, then that's what you're going to get. But it doesn't have to be so. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, I don't know what happened in Leicester, but in London, the Black Lives Matter marches mostly didn't end in, you know, mayhem. But that was also because community elders took it upon themselves to go along and make sure that it didn't happen. I mean, much like happened in America, you know, older men went out and made sure that certain things didn't happen. And that is a community that's really, it's a community actually looking out for itself, but also having the foresight to make sure that that, you know, so people who want to join in and make trouble, because there's always somebody who likes people, you know, there's always somebody who likes a scrap, and they'll go out on the street and they'll find a way to have that scrap. And if you can stop that happening, then you quite often end up with a more effective demonstration, because a more effective demonstration is about numbers. It's not about destruction so much. It's about numbers. So if you can have a peaceful demonstration, then that tends to, I think, make more of an impact. When you have to, like, I mean, in Brixton, I lived through the Brixton riots. That's where I grew up. And I don't think anyone ever thought of that as anything other than heavy-handed people pushing back against ridiculously heavy-handed policing. I mean, that's exactly what that was. And it wasn't, you know, if it was just black people, that would have been one thing, but it wasn't anything like that. There were loads of white people who were involved in that.
But okay, let's talk about the Black Lives Matter for a little while. Yeah? You said about peaceful. Wasn't that part of the problem? It was too peaceful, and there's no change. When the 80s, when we had a riot, there was loads of change. But it seems like, you know.
Yeah, but Robert, that change you talk about the 80s. Let me just back up a little thing that Rhoda was saying. I went on a march in 1982 when the Deptford 13 was murdered in an arson attack. There was a lot of black people. It's the most black people I've ever seen walking anywhere. And we was coming across the Thames in a peaceful march.
Joe, for those who don't know, what was the you talk about a march in London? What was that about?
It was a Deptford 13. 13 people got killed in an arson attack at a house party.
That's right, yeah.
And black people stood up and decamped and marched across the bridge from south of the bridge into North London going to Parliament. I went there as a student to study how will the media report this massive event where black people were saying enough is enough. So that was the intent of me being at that march, to look at the newspaper the following morning in terms of what actually happened. When we was coming across the bridge, you know bumblebees? When I see the policeman them with them helmet, I thought it was bumblebees on the north side of the river, ganged up, ready for us, and we were peaceful. And when we got across there, they became heavy-handed. And what ended up, some of the participants ended up busting up, what I used to call that newspaper place where all the newspapers used to
Fleet Street. Fleet Street.
And enough of the newspaper windows got bust because the police were hurting us, etc., etc. Now that started off peacefully, but what got to me, and this is when I learned the power of the media, which then describes words like uprising and riots. The next morning when I read the newspapers, when I actually attended this march, I was hearing words like riots,